Hi there. My name is Will Creedle. I am CPAC certified. I am a senior accessibility consultant here at DQ. I'm one of the many people here who create ACRs out of VPATs. So I'm very happy to lead the first part of this, and I'm going to pass it over to Heidi, who's going to lead the second part.
Thanks, Will. Hi, everybody. My name is Heidi Kelly Gibson. I am a strategic account director at DQ. I have been at DQ. My accessibility journey started about 4 years ago at DQ. I just want to say hello to my fellow Minnesotans. You may recognize your fellow accent here, so welcome and can't wait to get started here. So first is, why are you here? I know you're here probably because you've heard about a VPAT. You think you might need one. You're not sure. You think, or you've been told that you need one, but you don't know what it is or how you go about getting one. Or you've got that VPAT and what do you do with it now? So today we're going to spend time going over what a VPAT is and isn't, what it tells you about your product or digital property, how it differs from a conformance report, why you should get one, when you should get it, and then what you do with it once you have one. And at the end, we're hoping that you feel confident enough to speak in general about the ideas around a VPAT, when your team might need one, and how to go about getting the right one. If you have other reasons for being here today, throw them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll go ahead, get us started.
Well, thank you, Heidi. As you mentioned, we are going to talk about what you need to do to get your VPAT done. The first part is me. I'm going to be going over the who, what, why, how, and when. So without much further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So first off, we need to know what VPAT stands for. It's an acronym. It's Voluntary Product Accessibility Template. And I'm going to go into each of these steps for you. But on the first, I just want to mention that on the right, we have a picture of what a standard page from a VPAT looks like. We'll go into deeper detail on this, but I just want you to kind of see and understand that this is not a real in-depth document. It's very straightforward. There's 3 columns, and in each column, they talk about success criteria. So first is voluntary. You're choosing to do this. This is not a doc that's going to be driven generally by court cases, or it's not a legal requirement. It's not a verification of compliance. It is something you are choosing to do for your site or your whatever your target of test is, to give a general idea of the state of your accessibility. And that leads you to the P in VPAT, which is product. So this could be a section of a website, could be the entire website, a mobile app, forms, could be a sports watch, as long as the scope is defined. So let's say you're a bank and you want to make sure that your ability to fill out mortgages is conforming. You want to have a VPAT done on just that section. That's fine. You can do that as long as you define your target of test. That's the product. The A is for accessibility. That's not a big surprise, I think, to anyone here. Just a reminder that this is not a verification of compliance. It's a quick snapshot of your accessibility. It's a document to give you that quick reference to your current state. It's a document to be honestly assess your current accessibility. You're not providing a roadmap to people to see every single issue, but you're saying, hey, if you use a screen reader, you may have difficulty with 412 type issues, and here's where you might have some difficulties. And finally, it's a template. There are 4 types, but they're the same for everyone. It's a blank slate for you or your reviewing professionals to fill in. It's the same 4 templates for everyone. You just get to choose which one it's going to be. And here's a little terminology for you. This is a VPAT. You all come here to know what a VPAT is, but that's a template. That's the terminology we're going to use after this is Accessibility Conformance Report, or ACR. So what's a VPAT and what's an ACR? The Accessibility Conformance Report, or ACR, is a completed VPAT plus all the essential information about the report itself. But I'll let you know right now, it's pretty interchangeable. You may find that if you're doing an RFP, the person or company you're reaching out is going to ask you for a VPAT. What they really mean is an accessibility conformance report. They want you to pick a VPAT template and then fill it out with the information. but you're going to hear VPAT a lot. As a matter of fact, I'll probably slip up in the middle of this and call it a VPAT instead of an accessibility conformance report. It's that common. Just know that the VPAT is the template and the ACR is the finished product. So an ACR is like a nutrition label for your site. And on the right here, I have an image of a standard nutrition label for something like Triscuits. I can't remember exactly which one I pulled, but it tells you your average size of servings, how many servings there are, the calories, the total fat, etc. We've all seen these. And a VPAT or I did it already. An ACR is like a nutrition label for your site. It does the same kind of things at the same high level. It's good for potential customers and clients to know potential impacts to persons with disabilities, but it's not a deep dive into issues. Nutrition's labels give you that kind of level, but they don't tell you how much of the ingredients are in there or even how to cook it. And that's the same way with an ACR. It's not going to tell you how many issues there are or where those issues are in exact format. It's just going to talk about the fact that there are issues with certain areas along certain success criteria. Excuse me. And just like a person like myself might pick up a snack and choose it based on the information, all things being equal, being based on the nutrition label information, so too, the company might choose you guys based on your ACR. Now, the difference between an ACR and an audit is that an accessibility audit takes a granular issue-by-issue look at your website, app, or other technology and dives really deep. This is the one that generates all of the issues that talk about where this issue is occurring, what piece of code has the problem, what does the fix need to be. And this is the document that you base your remediation strategy on. This is the document that your developers and your design team and your QA get their hands on. And this is the document you use to go in a sprint model and determine what goes into the backlog and what gets fixed this week. And as such, that's not public facing. That's not something you want to share like you would an ACR. So I have to call out this image over here on the right. I asked for a historic image, and Laura, she's the person that gets these for this, is so good at this that not only did she get me a historic image, she got me a historic delivering documents. I don't know where she finds them, but this was really impressive. And it fits because we're talking about how little birds and the bees here about how VPATs become ACRs. So in order to go from the template to the accessibility conformance report, you need to first define your target of test, right? Are we testing a sports watch? Are we testing, believe it or not, I have done this for indoor chargers for your garage, for your electric car. You just need to determine along the lines, is this a whole website or is this an app that only works on Chevrolet cars? As long as you define that target of test, that's your first step. You can do this yourself, but it is not recommended. It is allowed, but there's just a lot of things you need to consider here. First of all, you may not have the qualified professionals to make accessibility assessments. And if you make a wrong assessment, that's problematic. You don't want to be seen as putting out a VPAT that's inaccurate. And your developers may have unconscious bias about your site. They may only think of it as the terms of a happy path that they go on, or they may have gaps in what they think the site does. There's no fault of their own, but there's an old adage you might come from in QA, which is that don't test what you write, right? So accessibility is a test. You know, when we do this, we're testing it for accessibility. So it's always good to have another external group do this, us or other people. Having said that, if you come from a large company that has its own internal accessibility team with qualified professionals, there's nothing that says you can't do your own ACR. So once you've determined this, the next step is an in-depth audit. That's what we were talking about before, the thing that generates all the issues. It's going to line them up to success criteria. You'll be able to say, oh, with this audit, there are 15 issues with 131 or 20 issues with image alts in 1.1.1. And that's going to be the thing that translates into what is and isn't supported within an ACR based on WCAG 2.0 or 2.1, Section 508, or EU success criteria. So that's a good segue into types of VPATs. On the right here, I have an image of the first 10 or so, 12 or so pages of a VPAT. You're not going to be able to read them. I just want you to understand by looking at this image that seeing a VPAT is a Word doc. And when you finish it, it's going to be a Word doc or an ACR that's in a PDF. It is not a big, complex thing. And they're all of these VPATs, these templates that you're going to choose from, they're all the same format. So there are 4 types here. The first one is VPAT 2.4 Revision 508. This is geared towards the federal government and contractors that work with the Fed. The federal government updated 508, which is, the Americans with Disabilities Act, relevant. They updated it in 2017 to include WCAG 2.0. So there's a lot of similarities between VPAT 2.4 Rev 508 and the following Rev WCAG. But if you're going to work with the federal government, this is the VPAT they're going to want you to turn into an ACR for them. If you're working with contractors who use it, then you're probably going to want to have that VPAT. The next one is VPAT 2.4 Revision WCAG. This is for non-governmental work, web-based pages, applications, mobile devices, basically private industry. You design a login system or a third party or two-factor authentication for other companies. If they're private companies, they're going to want this VPAT, which is based on the WCAG standards. And with this one, you get to choose between 2.0 or 2.1. The next one is VPAT 2.4 Revision EU. This is all for all companies looking to meet the EN 301549 standard. This is the one that says accessibility requirements suitable for public procurement of ICT products and services in Europe. ICT being, technology, computer technology. This is luckily the EU standard is also WCAG based, so it's very similar. But the last one is the INT. Don't ask me what it stands for. I actually don't know. I'm imagining international, but I have not actually ever had to come up with a definition of it. And this one covers all 3. So it's worth considering if you're a company that makes a widget that you're going to use with European businesses, the US government, and local businesses. Well, you might want to go ahead and get the INT and cover all those bases. Just because it's all 3 of them, though, doesn't mean it should cost 3 times as much. It's not creating 3 times as much work to do the INT. So that's another reason that you may want to consider doing an INT. But know that if you go with a company, they will be able to tell you which one to do. So who's the target audience of these? The first one is potential customers, vendors, and contractors that may require it as part of your RFP response. So let's take a scenario for that. You have a service or you have a widget that is used by customers on their own sites, and they may be conducting an audit of accessibility. Imagine Bank of America saying they need a cradle to grave collection of accessibility to know that everything that they're doing at least is trying to be accessible. So they may be needing a VPAT from you. That's an important distinction because that's happening more and more as time goes on. It used to be 5-10 years ago, you could say, oh, this doesn't work because it's a third party and you could get away with it. But that doesn't really work anymore as we're beginning to think of these sites as holistic things. They are greater than the sum of their parts. So just because you can't get a mapped system to work because it's third party doesn't mean you're off the hook to try and provide some sort of accessible alternative. And that's where you may fall into that with that company. The second scenario for that is bidding to have your product used by a company, and they're going to request that because accessibility matters to them. So you can get an ACR done, but we know that RFPs usually have a deadline on them. There's no guarantee that you can suddenly get an ACR done in time to meet that deadline. So you may actually be costing yourself potential business not having it. On top of that, you may get your ACR done from your VPAT, and you certainly won't have any time to remediate any of the issues. And it is possible to remediate some simple issues sometimes to make certain criteria go from does not support to support. Federal agents often require it to work with them. So there are scenarios where they don't because they have certain stipends. I know personally people who have gotten this passed because they work in things that cannot be made accessible without being dangerous to do so. But most scenarios are going to require your ACR based on that 508 VPAT. So the federal scenario for that is you're working with the Fed or a contractor who is working with the feds. Again, if you have that potential client and you have a potential clients in the private sector, this is where it's worth considering having the INT version. Otherwise, you might have to have two WCAGs, two ACRs, WCAG and 508. So, it really pays to know your client base, because then you know your ACR needs. The other examples would be companies that are risk averse. The benefit of posting a VPAT for public consumption often outweighs that risk. When you publish an ACR, you are saying we are aware of where we have difficulties for our client base and persons with disabilities. We are announcing this, and it implies that you are on top of it. At least you are considering the fixes that you need to do. You're not considering accessibility to be something to be ignored until a lawsuit comes around. It can help. It does outweigh sometimes the risks of not doing it. This one next, the persons with disability who want a quick summation of your app or site. This one doesn't get talked about enough, but it's very important. I'm going to use an example where I'm going to compare Google Home to Amazon Alexa. All things being equal, these work very similarly. So if I'm a person who has, let's say, motor difficulties, I may look at the VPATs between these two and look at the sections that deal with motor difficulties and say, oh, well, Google Home handles this a lot better than Amazon Alexa does. So I'm going to choose Google Home. The other example would be, let's say you have vision difficulties. Maybe Amazon Alexa's VPAT says it does much better than Google Home does. So I'm going to choose Amazon Alexa. Either one of those are going to get chosen based on the VPAT, because all things being equal, they are fairly equal except for that. Now, if you're a third party trying to enter this and you don't even have an ACR, then you're not even in the running in that situation, because all things being equal, the person with disabilities isn't going to be able to look at your ACR and say, this one meets my needs. So you're just not even going to get off the page into it. And it's worth noting that disabilities are not the same. So when you go up in competition with another bidder, you might have what's objectively the worse ACR, but you may do much better on things involving name, role, and value, which is used by screen readers, than the other client, the potential client does. And so, disabilities are not the same, and you might score better for this with your ACR, but the only way that the client is going to know that is if they have it to look at. And finally, there's a marketing benefit to this. In certain marketing segments, you get to set yourself apart. You get to show that there's other competitors are not even thinking about Ally yet or A11Y, let alone posting the current state of their products. You could be forward thinking in this and put yourself in a position to stand out. So let's talk about the when. As I mentioned before, you want to get it before you have an RFP asking for one. This allows you time to attack remediation on your own terms, and you can concentrate on sections that would improve accessibility the fastest and therefore your competitiveness. Because when you get an ACR, the team that gives it to you should be able to tell you, hey, these following issues in 211 keyboard that are blocking you, well, they're all in the main navigation. So if you fix it once, you're going to fix it everywhere, right? You will get that kind of information that helps you to make a decision on how to remediate and improve your ACR. You may have a client or client base that is wanting this information for their own internal reviews or Ally support. That's increasing that number. So it's much, much better position to be able to hand it to them when they ask for it than say, we'll get back to you, right? And you want to provide this information to your users. And we used that model before when we talked about differentiating yourself in the marketplace with users, individual users. And the last one, you want to show progress towards accessibility over time. So if you get an ACR done on whatever VPAT you choose, and 6 months later you make a big push towards fixing accessibility, you should run that VPAT again, that ACR again, and show that over time, you are getting closer and closer to supporting everything. You should get the benefits, both societally and marketing wise, of showing that you are putting in an extra effort. And having an ACR and updating an ACR is going to show that. So what does this ACR tell you? When you get it done, it's going to tell you the basics about the target of test. What are we testing here? It's going to tell you the standard you're testing against. Are we doing WCAG 2.0, WCAG 2.1? Are we doing the EU standard? Are we doing 508? And it's going to break down those success criteria in 4 levels: supports, partially supports, does not support, and not evaluated. You will see terminology that is similar to this. As long as it's along that lines, it's fine. Not evaluated could be NA, for example. If you get things like, if you see somebody who says works, that's a little bit of a red flag. It should be that they may not know what they're doing. It should be some language along this, and it should only be 4 choices. And supports is when, let's say it's keyboard, it works across the board. There's nothing that's going to stop a person who depends on a keyboard from working through this site. There may be some minor things that might be an impediment, a slow impediment a little bit, but generally speaking, there is nothing here that they can't do with a keyboard. Partially supports would be 85% of the site works for a keyboard, but there are 2 or 3 pages where there are instances of difficulty. So now we're in partially supports land. Does not support means you can't use a keyboard and expect to get what you need to from the site in that regard. And not evaluated is something like video captions. Well, if there's no video or audio or multimedia on your site, then you don't have to evaluate that. So what I'm showing you here is the first page of an accessibility conformance report. Google, in fact, is this one. They took the VPAT for VPAT version 2.4, and you see that it says based on VPAT version 2.4. This is their for section 508. This is the same for everybody because the template's the same. So you have the name of the product or version. In this case, it's Chrome for Windows. You have the report date. This is already 2 years old. You have the product description. Chrome is a web browser. You don't have to describe any deeper than you need to understand it. We all understand that Chrome is a web browser, so they don't have to go into the details about what a web browser is, what functions it should do. It's a product description. It's simple. Contact information. You should have somebody that can be contacted regarding your ACR. And in this case, there's Chrome VPATs at Google. Notice that they say VPATs too, because again, VPAT is what most people call it, even though it's not correct. And then in the notes section, this is where you get to flesh out some details. So this is where they're talking about it's a web browser with the primary purpose of allowing users to browse the web. They're saying it makes no claims of conformance for any third-party content that users access through the web. That's a fancy way of saying don't blame Chrome for a bad web page. And Chrome provides access to the document structure of web pages to the operating system through accessibility APIs. That's a really fancy way of saying if you write good HTML and good ARIA, there's no reason to expect that Chrome won't support your page for accessibility. And then in the notes, there's some scope here. In this case, it's the user interface for Chrome. It's that accessibility support I just talked about for Chrome, and then Chrome electronic documentation, which if you think of is like Google Drive. It does not include Chrome developer tools. So you have a chance here. This is defining your scope, right? That does not include the following things. So if I'm looking at this as a company to choose which browser we're going to use, and we're going to do stuff in developer tools quite heavily, then I'm going to say this doesn't suit me. But I know that rather than making a guess that it's covered or not. So the next page of your ACR is a little bit more about what you're doing and how. So the evaluation methods used, this was conducted by the American Federation of the Blind using JAWS and NVDA. This is where if it was DQ that were doing it, we'd be filling this part in about what we did to test and who we are. The next part is the applicable standards and guidelines. This is, if you recall, a 508. So it's got Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0. is part of 508 now. So it's got that standard there. And if you look in the section to the right, the column included in the report, you will see that level A is included, level AA is included, and level AAA is not. And then the next row says revised section 508 standards published January 2018 and corrected 2017, corrected 2018. Included in the report, yes. Here we see what they are using for their terms: supported with exceptions, not applicable. And then it's WCAG 2.0, not 2.1. And here, because it's 508, it mentions that the crossover, tables 1 and 2 are going to be WCAG, and everything else is 508, sections 5 and 6. And the last page I'm showing you here is an image of the very first table in it. It has 3 columns: criteria, conformance level, remarks, and explanations. In the criteria column, each row has a success criteria. It starts with 1.1.1 because that's the first one and it's level A. It's only going to go through level A, and this table 2 is level AA. The next one is 1.2.1, audio only and video only, pre-recorded, and so on and so forth. If you look at 1.1.1, the conformance level, it says Chrome UI supported, web content supported, electronic docs supported, and remarks and explanations is blank. You don't need to put anything in there if you support it. Now, you are likely only going to have one thing in conformance level with your product. This is just because it's Google and they're saying, Google Docs, their accessibility content, and their UI. So, but if we go down to the 4th row, and we'll see this is audio description or media alternative. It tells you it applies to other section 508 sections. You'll see that the Chrome UI is supported, the web content is supported, and electronic docs are not supported. So if you were melding all 3 of these things together, this would be a partially supports. And because we have something not supported here, in the remarks and explanations, we say electronic docs, this electronic documentation does not provide audio descriptions for pre-recorded media. That's the depth of the response you need to put in an ACR. You do not need to say, on this particular video in this particular location, here's this lovely roadmap to go and find all the issues you want yourself. You just need to say, for this type of material, we have the following problems. And you will see that it's the same with info and relationships, which is a big one. We have supported with exceptions for Chrome UI. Web content is supported. And again, electronic documents are supported with exceptions. And over here, it says on Chrome UI, Chrome supports appropriate info and relationships in all areas of the user interface, except the following. And so here we have a bullet within the browser history checks boxes for entries do not have a label directly associated with them. So that's very high level, just talking about where it is. And that's how any ACR should be filled out from top to bottom. And there's about, as you can see here, this is page 3 of 16. So there's 13 more pages of questions and success criteria. But that is it. That is an ACR, basically from the cradle to the grave, why you need it, when you need it, and what it does. So with that, I'm going to pass this back over to Heidi.
Thanks, Will. All right, so what I want to talk to you about today is about how you apply this to the accessibility journey. Some of what I'm going to say is a repeat of what you just heard Will say. I think it's good to have it repeated a little bit, but it's really about now applying it into what you're actually doing as a business to bring accessibility into the organization. So for me, I look at it as a journey. An accessibility journey has a very clear beginning. Then as it's being rolled out, you develop a recipe for success that works for your business. But it's important to note that it's never done. You are never done with accessibility. It is now happily a part of your daily work life. And so open arms, take it in. There's always going to be new technology that you're developing within your organization, new features, new code, new designs, and all of those need to be made accessible. So the journey starts and then it's ongoing. Part of the journey should be about shifting left and becoming more proactive than reactive. And that's an important part of the updates that need to happen in your software delivery lifecycle to maximize the impact of accessibility changes at that organizational level. And then determining the approach that works, that recipe for success for your organization should be a goal. But I also want to make it clear that you do not have to have the whole plan in order to get started. A lot about the VPAT and ACR is about being able to be transparent should you choose to be, and being able to get started and showing that progress over time. And that goes a long way. So what is this accessibility journey? Tell me a little more about that. On the screen is showing an image of railroad tracks running parallel. How I describe the journey is in 3 parallel paths. The path starts usually in one of 2 different ways. It's usually inspired by a legal requirement. That would mean you have a lawsuit or something along those lines, or maybe you just have a client contract requirement that tells you that in order for them to work with you, you need to have a VPAT or an ACR. And again, using those terms interchangeably for anyone who missed that because they're referred to in both ways. The other way that's often inspires that start to the accessibility journey is that your company just has a vision that focuses on inclusion. They want to do the right thing. They want to be leaders in accessible design and development. So they've decided that they're starting their journey now. The first path in the journey I consider the baseline. So this is where you're having an audit performed. Oftentimes, if you don't have these skills now, you're going to a third party, you're asking for assistance, and they are creating an audit for you. It's really important to look for somebody who can provide you with a really good audit with good results that tell you things like an impact level, so you can help prioritize the resolution of those issues, really explains the issues and the criteria it's a failure against. And then tells you how to fix the issues as well. All those are really important things to have part of that audit. Now, after the audit is sometimes the first place that we see an ACR being requested. And it makes sense, but this isn't always the place that it happens. So if you're working with a customer and you need to get some level of conformance in their hands as soon as possible, you may decide at this point, before you've even had a chance to remediate, to provide that ACR. And that can be a good choice. You have to weigh it out. Again, it's about the level of transparency that you want to communicate. The ACR is really a communication tool. So it depends on how you use it, where you decide to first show it to any of your customers. We'll talk a little bit more about that and the transparency. But oftentimes, instead of getting that ACR right there, we see companies decide to do some remediation and validation before they produce that document. So how that usually happens is you have the results, you start prioritizing them because whoever you worked with to get that audit gave you really good information, you know how to prioritize them. And now you have to commit to resolving them. So that means you're treating them like any other bug. Accessibility is just like any other bug. So you're going to plan the remediation of those in your sprints. You're going to create bugs in your issue tracking system, and you're going to assign resources to get them resolved. Again, resolving and being able to understand how to do that, it might not be a skill you have right away. That's totally fine. There are lots of education materials out there. There are other companies that can help you do that. But it's just about moving forward and getting those steps completed and starting that journey. Through that process, as you understand and start working on those issues, you want to make sure that you're validating them, that they've been fixed. There's automated tools out there that can help you with that. But then this is usually where the ACR is first produced. Again, the ACR it has many benefits to it. It's not just saying, here it is, this shows how compliant I am. It can be used to document your progress. You can choose to publish it. I know I saw some questions about that, and I'll address those too. You can use it to update your accessibility statement to provide more information. And also a really good thing to do here with your ACR is make sure that your appropriate internal teams, like your contracting department, has it. So when RFPs and things like that come through for your company, you can give those to your potential customers. And then I think it's really important to mention that then you're on repeat. So VPAT or an ACR, the first time you have it produced, it doesn't have to be clean. It is great if you have no issues listed on that, but that doesn't have to be the first version of your ACR. You can choose to publish it as is, again, that transparency, or just have a draft of it available. So if someone does ask for it, you've got it, but then you use it as a tool to talk about where you are in your accessibility journey, the steps you're taking to resolve any issues that are present and things like that. So then as you're going through creating that VPAT, the ACR, you are then repeating the process of remediation, validating, and continuing to improve that document. Now, the second parallel path I want to talk about includes training, tools, documentation, and some internal team process changes. Training, obviously, people don't know how to resolve accessibility issues if they haven't done some training. They need to understand the goals of the company, the standards, and the requirements. And then they need to have the tools to be able to run automated testing or do color contrast analyzing. There's tools out there that help you with flashing content to understand if it's flashing too fast, things like that. So making sure that you're getting the training in place and the tools that the teams need to be able to do validation and testing themselves. And then focusing on some documentation that you need to move forward. So creating things like best practices that you want to make sure organization-wide or team-wide communicated so you're all being cohesive. And then another really good piece of documentation to consider as part of this path is creating an accessibility acceptance criteria library so that you can, again, create that consistency and develop that within your teams. The process changes I'm mentioning, again, they're at the team level. So when I say team, I mean like your development team, your Scrum teams. The process changes here, things just in your SDLC. So as you're rolling out your feature changes in your sprints, you're making sure accessibility is a topic in the retros. You make sure that you are finding ways to identify accessibility issues so that you can track them and their resolution and decrease over time. All right, that's all great. That sounds like a great path, all good things you want to do. But what really does that ACR have to do with that path? Because the ACR happened in the first path we talked about, but it actually has a lot to do with this path too. That ACR gives insight into the areas that learning is most needed and where you're already doing well. So since that ACR is broken down by success criteria, there's a really easy way to see areas that teams may need more training and learning opportunities. So it's a nice tool to be able to put together a training program. And then again, that whole showing progress over time. So as you are in your issue tracking system, if you're creating tags that are helping you identify those issues and track them being depleted over time, those are all telling your story and helping you forward on your journey. And then the third path is organizational change. The first two paths are great and they're a lot of work and there are a lot of good stuff comes out of them, but they are not going to be possible to be continued for long term if you do not have this third path also happening in parallel with them. And that's at the organization. You're thinking about policy, procurement, governance, and then the people that are being impacted by those changes. So policies need to be established to support accessibility goals within the organization. Procurement needs to know what the requirements are for any vendors that they are pulling in to be working with you. So in your VPAT, you don't have a bunch of issues that are all third-party related. You're pulling in and you're supporting that goal for accessibility, even in the vendors that you're working with. Creating governance so that you're double checking things. And how the VPAT plays into this is that it's an entry point into to internalizing a process and starting a conversation about accessibility within your policies and your other processes. And the VPAT also, again, that's that place where you can see where people are doing really well or where they need guidance and training. So make sure that you're thinking of that in the organizational change path as well. So then we talk a little bit about conformance, evidence, and the commitment there. On the screen showed an infinity sign spin in there, and then this infinity sign is made up of people, and I think they look like they're running, but they're all running in that shape of the infinity sign. And that's again to symbolize that it takes everybody, and that it's not work that's done. It's something that continues over time. Conformance evidence, it's exactly that. It's the evidence that of your level of conformance at a certain point in time. And that comes in the form of an ACR. It can be referenced in your accessibility statement, which we'll talk about. It is also a valuable document and a valued document that call centers should be aware of. And then it is also, again, that measurement of where you are at a point of time that you can show that progress towards. If you decide to publish your ACR, again, the transparency is really important here. I think across the board for accessibility, if you're being transparent, you're trying really hard to do the right things, it goes a long, long way. It communicates your commitment to accessibility, and especially if you're using it as a communication tool to show this is where we are now, this is where we're going, this is how we're going to do it. And a lot of that is not necessarily documented in the ACR, but it is documented in your accessibility statement. Folks that don't know what an accessibility statement is, that's typically a page on your website or in your application that just does exactly that. It states where you are in your accessibility journey and the things that you're doing to become more accessible. Also in publishing that ACR, know that you're not required to publish it. Some companies choose to publish it. Adobe has all of theirs out there. It's quite interesting. But you might decide to just keep it on hand. So when it's being requested of you, you can share it out. Again, I mentioned a draft VPAT or ACR earlier. You can also have that ready. So as you're working on maybe one that you're really wanting to publish and a version that you're happy with, you might have a draft that's on hand, and that's totally fine too. It's, again, that ability to show the progress over time and have a plan in place to achieve it. We'll mention some of these things, but again, when do you update that ACR, the accessibility statement? It all kind of ties together there, but it's when significant features are released. So obviously you've got new features out there. You want to make sure that you have a VPAT that represents their level of conformance. You might have user interface that has undergone some substantial changes. You want to make sure that you have an updated ACR for that. And then a general rule of thumb is every 12 to 16 months. That, of course, varies, whatever makes sense within the organization. But 12 to 16 months is usually what we see as far as when folks are looking to update that VPAT and get a new one out there. And then the final part of that is thinking about what about your other products. You might be requested to provide an ACR for one of your products, but don't stop thinking about your other products and how they should be represented possibly by an ACR as well, and then the scope that should be included for that. And then continuing the journey. On your screen are lots of words that have to do with the journey. Words like documentation, process, subject matter experts, policy, executive support, progress, conformance. All of these are words that have to do with your journey. But in the center-ish of the screen is the word repeat. And I think that is key to keep in mind. The journey keeps on going. To continue that journey, there's many stages and steps to bring your maturity up. Starting the journey is critical. And again, you don't have to have a fully baked plan in order to start it. You need to recognize that it's part of your daily life now and that you need to continue the journey past the ACR creation. So you have your audit done, you have your ACR. That doesn't mean that you're finished. Your journey continues from there. And just as a reminder, that involves the training, the tools, the executive support, and those words that are on the screen here. Remember, and this is just in summary of all the topics in the past that we talked about here, that the ACR influences or is directly an outcome of all of the parallel paths of the journey as I see them. In that baseline assessment, you want to be documenting your current state of accessibility and be transparent. You want to understand the results of the assessment or audit that you had done and how your remediation is going to impact that ACR. Make sure you're prioritizing appropriately. Make sure if you have a certain client that has certain flows that they really need to have working well, make sure that's represented in that ACR. Know that your third-party content is still going to be on your VPAT, so make sure you're choosing vendors that are accessible. It is your responsibility to influence them towards being accessible. And then use that ACR to tell your story. This is where you started. This is where you're going. This is how you're getting there. The learning path, the ACR again can influence what the learning is needed and how a program should be built to support the people that are being responsible for accessibility. Breaking down that criteria by the WCAG success criteria or the 508 standards as an ACR does, that allows you to promote experts, champions within the teams, address the issues, and then do training. Also, you're able to recognize the teams that are doing really well and maybe where they need to spend some more time. And then it allows you to show that progress over time. And then that final path, the organizational path, that's about the VPAT or the ACR is an entry point to internalizing a process and starting a conversation, especially within the policy area. It helps your procurement team understand what kind of requirements potential partners need to meet in order to support your accessibility goals. And then it helps continue the story of why accessibility is important and the progress that your organization has made. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, really great job, Heidi and Will. I'm going to come back on camera here for our Q&A portion. Really great information. I know there was a lot shared there. And so I want to thank you all for that great presentation. And now we have about 10 minutes left. I'm going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar. I see a lot in the Q&A tool on Zoom, but if you have been saving your questions, feel free to put those in now and we will get to them. The first one I'm going to start with is going back to the relationship between automated and human manual testing involved in performing and validating ACRs or VPATs. Could you both speak to that a little bit more?
Want to go first, Will?
Sure. Automated testing is certainly a big part of it. It's one of the tools that helps you collect a lot of the very obvious kind of low-hanging fruit issues, and it's very, very good at telling you issues that can be resolved quickly. For instance, color conformance issues are often caught by automated tools, but manual testing is always required because in the end, persons who use assistive technology, whether they be screen readers, sip and puff devices, what do I got here? If we can see it, we've got a switch. They're manually testing your product when they use it. And so you need to have experts who are doing the same thing because you can get a completely clean automated run and still have a site that does not work for persons with disabilities. So it's important to have both.
I think you answered that perfectly.
Awesome. We'll move into the next one. Great job, Will. A person in chat is asking, with WCAG 2.2 coming soon, it's on the horizon in terms of accessibility standards, should they wait to complete their VPAT or ACR? What should they do in the meantime?
No, I'm going to let Heidi answer this as well, but it will, just because WCAG 2.2 is coming next year does not mean that it's going to be adopted as any industry standard anytime soon. So you need to determine if you're going to do 2.0 even still, because for instance, 508 doesn't care about 2.1 at all. I advised 2.1 because it fixed a lot of gaps that existed specifically with people who navigate by sight and speech. There were issues that were missed completely in 2.0 for that. But 2.2 is not going to be a standard that we're going to be legally held to for quite a while, I would say. So stick with doing it now.
Yeah, it took time for 2.1 to be the main standard everybody was going towards. So I agree with what Will said. But then it's about telling that story where you started. So it wouldn't be bad to say we're 2.1 compliant, 2.2 came out, we're working on that next.
Awesome. Thanks both. I have a good question here. So what if you asked for a VPAT from a potential partner, and they come back with all supports for everything, and you know that is not the case, that their product is not fully accessible? What should you do in that situation?
That is a great question. First thing I would do is look and see in that section at the very top. Let me see if I can go back to it here. That talks about who did this, evaluation methods used. All right, I would look and see who evaluated this, because chances are it's not going to be evaluated by a professional. It's going to be evaluated internally. And I would then say that, I would know what issues you were facing before saying, hey, maybe you guys need to update it. The second thing I would look at is how old is this ACR?
Awesome.
Heidi, anything to add on that one, Heidi? Or
Nope, you got it.
Cool. This is another interesting question. So thanks everybody for these good questions. So when you are in procurement and you're asking for vendors to provide an ACR, should you ask them for their ACR to be created by an independent auditor?
That's a great question. I would say that it's a decision you have to make. I would say that getting a third party to provide an ACR has its benefits, because it's looked at that there's no bias involved at all, and that it's probably a better representation. That's not to say that companies don't create their own, but I would say that just in general, if you're having a third party help you with that, vendors and such are going to feel like that's a stronger representation.
yes, I 100% agree. The only caveat I would say is if it's a company that is particularly known for their accessibility work. For instance, I think Bank of America is pretty well known for having a huge accessibility department. Then you might be able to trust that. But if you don't know that for yourself, then I would agree with Heidi. It's just better to have a third party do it.
Awesome. And I saw some people asking in chat again about the deck and all the resources that we included. We will be sharing those, so don't fret. I'll be sending those via email with the recording. So going to dive back into questions. Heidi and Will, if you see any that you really want to address, feel free to just ask them, but I'm going to keep moving on with one.
Well, I just wanted to,
Yeah.
so I had seen Peter and Courtney, they had mentioned, they had some questions there about publishing and promoting. I hope that I covered that in your questions. Always reach out if I didn't quite get there. And then Marie also had a question about who does the audit. That can be third party. I hope I kind of covered that when I spoke too. It can be third party. You might have an accessibility team that can help you with that audit. It just kind of depends on what your setup is.
Awesome. Thanks, Heidi. So this next question is asking, the use of partially supports is not always clearly described by the vendor. Do you have strategies to sort things out when the vendor is unable to describe it accurately? Would a series of unresolved partially supports lead you to decline a prospective vendor?
So you're always free to ask especially a prospective vendor who wants your business, can you clarify more about what this partially supports means? And I'm taking it on sort of as read that this particular partially supports is part of a section that's very important to your client base, because, again, partially supports video captioning doesn't matter if that's not going to be part of your business model, but partially supports 412 or 131 is a big deal pretty much to everybody. So there's that. Asking for further clarification should not be something that is a problem. If it is, that should kind of be a red flag if they don't want to tell you, a potential buyer, what this means. And then I guess the second part to that is, well, actually, I kind of forgot the second part, so I'll stop there.
No worries at all. If it comes back to you, feel free to chime in.
Okay.
I think we answered this, but I want to just make sure we're clarifying. Someone asked in the Q&A, does having an ACR for your products replace the need for an accessibility statement? Or would you want to link to the ACR from the accessibility statement?
So I think it's all about the linking. You can, again, it's up to you how your organization wants to handle it, but I think that it's really good to have the statement out there because that's telling your story. Your ACR can say one thing, but if you're not putting behind it what you're doing to resolve, maybe if there's issues in it, what your plan is, all the other things that you have in place to support accessibility, then you're missing a huge chunk of your story. So if you're choosing to publish your ACR, I would definitely link it to your accessibility statement so that they are in tune together.
And if somebody is looking for your ACR, they are probably going to start with the accessibility statement to see if it's there. So it's good to have it there as well. And then you're like Heidi's saying, you're giving them more of a holistic view of accessibility as a company when they get to see both of them.
Awesome. Looks like we have time for maybe one more question. And I think we can land on this one. Sorry, there's so many. I'm just scrolling through them all, but thank you all for your participation. So you did answer this, but I want to make sure we're clarifying. So what is it considered to be an outdated VPAT? And should they be updated yearly?
So I think that there's lots of reasons why you should update your VPAT. If you have significant changes to the platform, you want to update your VPAT. If there's new features you want to make sure are captured in your VPAT, those are all good times to update it. I wouldn't wait until a year has passed. I would get that in as soon as you can. But if there hasn't been any significant changes, I would say annually is a good milestone to shoot for. Every 1 year to maybe 18 months is a good time frame to look at doing it.
Yeah, I agree. And along those lines, this was a question I saw earlier. What would invalidate a VPAT? If you have an internal accessibility team who's testing this as you go, you can be relatively confident to keep the VPAT until you feel there's been enough structural change in it that it's better and it's worth doing, right? But if you're doing a wholesale change, if you're doing a site redesign or anything like that, you can consider that being, especially if you do not have an internal accessibility team, you can consider that as being something that invalidates the VPAT because essentially it's an entirely new product and you should consider that.
I hope everybody has a great rest of their Thursday. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.